tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
I kicked the Canada Post glass door.
Marking 10 years, how prison changed the life of one Stanley Cup rioter.
And I, forgive me.
Also,
where do you want to go?
Salt Spring to visit my brother and his wife.
Gearing up to travel, British Columbians make up for time lost. And mandatory day passes return to visit the province's most popular parks.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
This 10 years ago today, just outside of our CBC studios, the streets of downtown Vancouver erupted in mayhem and chaos in the Stanley Cup riot after the Canucks lost in the final, a night seared into the memory for many of us. A decade later, the scars on the streets here are largely gone, but as Susanna De Silva tells us, for some who played a role in that tragic night, the lessons that stayed are as clear as ever.
And I, forgive me, play my part, overturn 2 squad cars.
Forgiveness is something Bradley Peters has been seeking for 10 years, a journey he's now put to paper.
Reaches against the current to grab my face and scream, "This is an effing riot."
20 years old at the time of the riot, often in trouble with the law, quickly swept up in the moment, he says.
There was a young guy that had climbed on top of an outhouse, and then another guy ran and drop-kicked the outhouse, and the guy fell off.
He intended to just watch for a few minutes, but he says the mob mentality took over.
I kicked the Canada Post glass door. That was my first thing I did. Eventually helped some people flip 2 police cars.
Many of those there that night say there was something in the air long before the smoke and tear gas.
There was some tension that was building, and certainly by into the final period, you could feel the shift.
Paramedic Brian Twaits was embedded with a unit of the police.
As a paramedic, putting on a riot helmet with a shield and picking up a shield to protect myself, thinking, wow, what have I got myself into?
He spent hours treating everything from sprained ankles to anxiety attacks, while also being a target.
Bottles, potted plants, pieces of the fence, of those blue fences they were throwing at us.
But in the meantime, it was destruction across the city.
You should be ashamed of yourself!
But there were those who challenged the mob.
I don't know whose car it is, but I'm not leaving this car. You know why? This is Canadian values. What is wrong with people?
Not even giving up when challenged with a weapon.
I'm 5'2" and 130 pounds. This makes you feel big. Bring it.
But in the end, they were too much.
Window frame came out, someone picked up, lunged at me. I grabbed it, tried to push the people back.
The crowd would also be too much for Rob Mackay, who tried to keep people out of the bay. Lucky for him, 2 others stepped up.
I think I realized the severity of it as soon as Rob was on the ground and the kicks and the punches didn't stop. So I just kind of walked in. I tried to put my arms around to separate some people.
He's getting hit from every side. He goes down. I start running in a little bit faster. At that point, the individual with the can of bear mace was already in the middle of emptying it all over Rob, and there was no turning back.
A lifelong friendship created in a moment of chaos.
We still know that if I called them and asked them for help, I could almost guarantee that either one of these guys would come up and show up to my house after 5-10 years, no problem.
Several men would be convicted for assaulting Mackay. Some of the hundreds of investigations launched and public shaming that followed the riot thanks to the sea of smartphones.
They had made a Facebook page showing all the photos of people that were at the riot, and that my photo was on there.
Peter spent half an hour rioting before going home. He pleaded guilty to participating in a riot. He was sentenced to 4 months in jail because he was on probation at the time. He says he felt more shame for that than for any of the other, possibly worse things he had done in his life.
The shame and the embarrassment that I felt from my family, especially my extended family, that was one of the hardest things for me to deal with. The shame from the city, the shame from society as a whole.
He says while his jail time was somewhat of a catalyst for him to change his life, he says he was unusually lucky.
For the vast majority of people that go to prison, it's just it's the beginning of an endless cycle of recidivism and violence, and it actually leads to young people getting connected with gangs and drug dealers and criminal records that inhibit you from getting a job and stigma from your family and friends and society.
He was able to get his degree in creative writing from UBC and is working on a book of sonnets about his experiences with the criminal justice system.
Forgive me again. I know I should. I need to repent.
Hoping he can be an example that a moment in time like this doesn't have to define you. Susanna De Silva, CBC News, Vancouver.
Now, the Good Samaritan you saw in that story trying to protect that car is still unknown to us, but reporter Susanna De Silva would like to keep going and trying to find her. So if you know who that is, send Susie an email at the address on your screen. Today marks the first day in months that recreational travel is not only allowed within BC, but even encouraged. Many British Columbians cooped up for months say they're keen to explore the province. And as the CBC's Michelle Gassoub reports, the tourism industry is banking on that enthusiasm.
The official green light has been given. Many British Columbians already know where they want to go.
Tofino, for sure.
And who they want to see.
Salt Spring to visit my brother and his wife.
Yeah, I'd like to go back to my family cabin and see my mom.
The Kootenays. Visit my family. I haven't seen my parents in more than a year.
I'd love to. Support local.
The tourism industry hopes all that enthusiasm will translate into spending.
So it's been nothing short of devastating for the tourism businesses in British Columbia.
Pre-pandemic, tourism was a $22 billion industry. Now revenues are down a whopping 70%.
What we are optimistic about now is that this is just the beginning of, what we know will be a multi-step return to recovery.
All that pent-up demand means some popular spots are getting booked up fast.
We estimate we will return to 2019 levels, revenue levels, by about 2024. So we're expecting a pretty rapid rise post-pandemic.
In fact, many campsites in BC are already booked up, but if you haven't made your plans yet, you're not too late.
There's still lots of opportunity to book a hotel room and have a longer stay in our community. So I'd encourage people to consider that. Travel BC, get to know your province maybe like you haven't before.
But when it comes to out-of-province travelers, they're being asked to stay away, as BC isn't flinging open the doors just yet. As for those of us with loftier dreams,
Tulum. I'd go to Mexico.
There's still a little longer to wait. Michelle Gassoub, CBC News, Vancouver.
Let's take a look now at the COVID-19 situation across the province. 108 new infections today, up from the weekend, but no new deaths. 139 people are in hospital. 39 of those are in intensive care. That's the lowest number since November. 76% of adults have had at least one shot in BC. That's one of the highest rates in the country. And some of Canada's premiers are planning to help with identifying burial sites at former residential schools.
We stand ready to take our direction from the leadership of the communities across British Columbia. Some 22 residential schools were in operation in British Columbia. Sandy Silver and I will be in Lower Post to dismantle and destroy the last vestiges of the residential school there.
Ontario has pledged $10 million to commemorate these sites. Alberta announcing a multi-million-dollar package involving grants in the coming days. Saskatchewan has not committed funding at this point, but has offered resources to support Indigenous communities. And Indigenous advocates are calling on Richmond City Council to adopt First Nations land acknowledgements. The municipality is one of two major BC cities that don't formally recognize traditional owners. As John Hernandez reports, the gesture is among the Truth and Reconciliation calls to action.
If you want to know what Metro Vancouver was like hundreds of years ago, Howard Grant might be the best person to ask.
The name that I carry is my great-great-great-grandfather. He's the man who met Captain Narvaez in 1791 and Captain Vancouver in 1792.
He's a Musqueam councillor who has helped maintain the nation's history. Musqueam's traditional territories sprawl across the region, and it's something that many municipalities, including Vancouver, formally acknowledge during events like council meetings. But a handful of cities don't, including Richmond.
It's because of their being uneducated to the history of the land and of the people that resided on this land prior to contact. And that's so important in this era of reconciliation.
That's why Grant is calling on Richmond to change course. Land acknowledgements are among the Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls to action. Indigenous lawyer and Richmond resident Chaslyn Gillanders has been advocating by his side.
It shows respect to the Indigenous nations, and it's just the appropriate thing to do.
The pair spoke at a city council meeting on Monday, urging the municipality to take greater steps towards reconciliation.
We have an opportunity to create a new chapter, indeed probably a new book.
And while councillors were receptive, the city's mayor says land acknowledgements aren't in the cards anytime soon. Richmond is embroiled in two lawsuits with two First Nations, including Musqueam, over parcels of land, which the mayor says is keeping it from making any declarations.
We demonstrate our sincerity and our wish to reconcile in dozens of different ways, but to make a land acknowledgement is the very matter that is the subject of some very, very serious litigation.
Reasons that don't satisfy Musqueam leaders.
They're using it as a cloud cover, as a cloak.
An impasse that for now appears unwavering, despite a growing movement to make amends for the past. John Hernandez, CBC News, Vancouver.
100 years after the end of prohibition in BC, the push to decriminalize drugs is gaining ground in this province. As Eva Yugensenj reports, one advocate says a century of legal liquor consumption is evidence that regulated substances save lives.
Today, there are nearly 200 BC liquor stores across the province. But back when Prohibition came to an end in 1921, there were just 9 government stores. It's safe to say it was a soft launch of take-home legal booze.
It wasn't up until the 1950s that we had a cocktail lounges legalized in Vancouver. After the Prohibition, what happened is that they basically allowed drinking to happen in beer halls.
Beer and then spirits, rum, whiskey, gin, and vodka were gradually legalized. Even during Prohibition, alcohol was never more than a doctor's note away.
There were medical prescriptions. You could go to your doctor, and for about 50 cents, you could get basically all the alcohol you wanted.
Some believe the same approach could be used with drugs.
Maybe you could buy something over like cocaine or a cocaine derivative over the counter from a pharmacist.
The anniversary gives her hope that other illegal substances won't always be so heavily restricted.
They ended prohibition, alcohol prohibition, at the end of that epidemic. At the end of the 1918-21 epidemic, which is a remarkable parallel, after realizing how much harm prohibition does to society at large.
In BC, more than 7,000 people have died from overdoses after using toxic drugs in the last 5 years. Thousands also died during Prohibition from drinking denatured alcohol or moonshine. Ward believes it's hypocritical to criminalize certain drugs when other substances like alcohol and coffee are commonplace.
Regulation, legalization can involve, safe consumption rooms. I mean, a bar is essentially a safe consumption site for alcohol.
Back in 1921, it would have been unthinkable that the government would one day sell legal weed as well as legal booze. Advocates hope BC is ready to take its next step towards decriminalization. Eva Yugensenj, CBC News, Vancouver.
Well, once again, you'll have to get a day pass to use the province's busiest parks this summer. The free passes are meant to keep crowds down at the 5 most popular destinations. The passes will be available at 7 a.m. the day before you plan to go. The parks and areas requiring day passes are Joffrey Lakes, Golden Ears, the Berg Lake Trail at Mount Robson, the Backside Trail at the Stawamis Chief Park, and the Diamond Head, Rebel Creek, and Cheakamus trailheads at Garibaldi Park. Johanna is off tonight, and Amy is back. Amy, a bit of a wild day, so are we in the clear yet?
I don't think so. No, actually. We still have a few tricks up our sleeve for this evening. So we saw intense rain on and off in many areas today. We saw some hail. There was brilliant sunshine. And then we are still left with some unsettled conditions for this evening. Overnight and early tomorrow morning, we could still see some shower activity. But then we do really clear up and we head into the sunny, gorgeous, warm stretch. It coincides with the first day of summer on Sunday, so everything is going to be looking much better once we get through tonight. So as you can see, sunshine, temperatures getting into the low to mid-20s, and I'll have a full look at the provincial weather in just a few minutes.
Sounds good. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks, Amy. Well, during the NHL playoffs on CBC, just a reminder of how and where you can watch this show. We'll be on every weekday at 6 p.m. online, streaming on CBC Gem, YouTube, and Facebook. And then we'll be on television after the hockey game each evening. Those times will vary depending on when the game starts and when it ends. You can always watch our show on demand, streaming at our website, cbc.ca/BC. A massive rise in COVID cases at Canada's prisons. How vaccine hesitancy is fueling the surge. Next. Thank you for staying with us during our commercial-free live stream. A university town in Nova Scotia is joining the race to become the first in Canada to reach net zero carbon emissions. More than 80% of the energy used in Antigonish already comes from renewable sources. Kayla Hounsell went there to find out how they're doing it and how they hope to inspire others.
So this is the heat pump that we had installed.
Martin McLaren jumped at the chance when his town offered to help set up a greener source of heat.
Our house was heated with the electric heat and it wasn't very efficient.
It's just one of the ways the town of Antigonish is trying to go green, 100%.
It's attainable and we know it's attainable.
The mayor says right now 84% of Antigonish's energy is renewable. She admits her town has a head start because it has its own electric utility. It also owns a wind farm, which generates 40% of its power.
That's 40% we didn't have to buy off of another company. So that enables us to make sure that we're going green.
The town is also planning to install electric vehicle chargers and solar gardens. The mayor says all of it will not only help this community achieve emissions goals, but the entire province and the country.
One person can make a difference, one block can make a difference, one town can make a difference. We're not a very big town, but this is transformational.
The next move is targeting the biggest emissions producer here, St. Francis Xavier University.
We double the size of the Antigonish area when our students are back in town.
The university has already installed solar panels and geothermal heating in new buildings. The problem is its central heating plant.
We use a very dirty fuel source. It's run by bunker C oil, 2,500 vehicles off the street if we could get rid of it.
The plan is to build a new plant powered by the wind farm and hydroelectricity. Most of the plans help the pocketbook too. McLaren says his heat pump saved him $500 in the first 4 months.
I think it's a great thing, for this small town that we are to try to be leaders within our country.
There are other Canadian communities with similar goals. Antigonish is happy to be in the race and welcomes healthy competition for the greater good. Kayla Hounsell, CBC News, Antigonish, Nova Scotia.
Okay, starting tomorrow, the CBC will be bringing in some changes that will affect you, our online viewers on Facebook. We will be turning off comments on all posts and video live streams, including this newscast for 1 month. Again, that's only on Facebook. You can read more about why we're doing this on our website, cbc.ca/BC. And we'll be back in just a few moments. While nearly 2/3 of Canadians have now had their first vaccine, CBC News has new details on one vulnerable group where hesitancy can grow and the infection rate is 6 times the national average. There are more than 6,000 cases in prisons and jails right now, and 9 people have died. Tonight, Valerie Ouellette has our exclusive reporting.
They're on a volunteer mission at one of Canada's least immunized prisons. A doctor, some lawyers, even a former prisoner, urgently trying to convince vulnerable inmates to get the shot that could save their lives.
And it will be a true tragedy if we see a 4th wave happening in these particular very high-risk settings.
On average, 13 out of every 50 prisoners in provincial jails tested positive, while in federal penitentiaries, it's closer to 6 out of every 50. A far cry from the 2 out of every 50 Canadians who caught COVID.
It reflects what we saw in long-term care homes. It's known that living in these congregate living settings is a risk factor.
Because of that risk, the National Advisory Committee on Immunization said prisoners should get a shot after long-term care residents, before healthy Canadians in their 60s. Prisoners detained at this Ottawa jail waited until May 18th. When the vaccine was finally offered, one inmate told CBC News no healthcare staff could answer his questions about the health risks.
Someone outside would have access to internet. We're not privy to any information.
The fastest rollout was in federal penitentiaries. Nearly 80% are vaccinated, many with second doses. While in provincial jails, roughly half of all inmates had their first dose. 4 provinces couldn't tell CBC News how many inmates were immunized. 3 hours later, the volunteers are done.
We had a whole range sign up for the vaccine.
The Ontario government told CBC News inmates do get private consultations with healthcare staff, but the province still ranks last when it comes to getting prisoners vaccinated. As of right now, 12 jails have at least 1 active COVID case. In federal prisons, there are none. Valerie Ouellette, CBC News, Toronto.
A sure sign of the slow return to normal. After the break, we talked to some Victoria residents who weren't passing up the opportunity to catch a movie matinee.
Good evening. You're looking at a live shot from Georgia Street here in Vancouver. There will be no party in this city tonight. The Canucks have lost the Stanley Cup to the Boston Bruins. This is a CBC News Vancouver special for viewers across the country on CBC News Nets. Natalie Clancy is outside on our CBC Plaza watching what's going on down there. Natalie, a little unrestful right now. What's going on?
Heartbreak is the moment, Tony, and I want to warn you, if you hear some loud bangs, it's firecrackers, it's not gunfire. More than 100,000 people packed the street behind me today with high hopes, only to have their dreams dashed. Now, tonight, it has been going well so far, but people are still shouting, "Go Canucks, go." I don't think people know what to do with themselves. We did see tonight a lot of families with children skedaddle early, concerned for the heavy drinking. Now, take a look what our cameras caught just around the corner. It gives you a sense of the mood tonight. There has been some fighting, some fist fights. Weeks and weeks of tension built up. This was supposed to be a party, not this kind of a scene. As you can see why parents might have taken the kids home a little early. SkyTrain's full of people heading home. This is also a concern. Police did close down the liquor stores early, maybe not early enough because there have been people drinking since before noon. They were drinking, hoping to get rid of their tension, and now there is a heavy police presence and a little bit of trouble we're hearing about on Georgia. So if you do hear those firecrackers, not a big concern. I have to tell you, just for some perspective, in 1994, the last time the Canucks lost the Stanley Cup, there were 50,000 people on the streets. Tonight, there's more than 100,000. Back then, $1 million in damage was done tonight. I can tell you the only damage I see is being done to people's livers from all the drinking and, of course, to their spirits. I'll throw it back to you, Tony.
And there are reports of trouble downtown tonight. Reporter Melanie Nagy is on Granville Street right now. Melanie, tell us what's going on there.
Yeah, I have to tell you that just recently we've noticed an influx of people making their way up Granville Street. So far, though, the crowds have been relatively okay. A lot of people just expressing they're upset, they're, feeling dejected because of the game. But so far, people, their tempers, their demeanor has been pretty even-keeled, but in the back alleys, the police, we have noticed that they have been pulling people aside, dumping out alcohol. Have to say that a lot of the people they have been pulling aside, relatively younger people with alcohol. The police here, though, I'm going to tell you, they are on edge. We have been told that one officer came behind me. He wanted to stand behind me while we were doing our program, and now I'm just going to push into the crowd to give you a sense of how many people have arrived here. And I said, so far things are good. We have been hearing just more trouble with alcohol, if anything, but police said they are bracing for anything.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox. On June 23rd, Anita Bathe will moderate a panel of medical experts at UBC Dialogues Medical Innovations. Where is technology leading us? Learn more at alumni.ubc.ca. And June is Filipino Heritage Month, and CBC BC wants to share stories from BC's vibrant Filipino community. If you have a story to tell, head to cbc.ca/mabuhay today.
The first day movie theaters are open in BC, and moviegoers are excited to get back.
Movies are part of my life, entertainment. I've been missing it so much.
Very exciting.
Yeah, weird though, just how everything's going to work now.
Yeah.
My wife's looking forward to the popcorn.
Those people caught a matinee today in Victoria. The move to the next phase of the COVID-19 restart plan means cinephiles can finally get their film fix. Starting today, Cineplex is reopening 24 theaters across the province. Landmark Cinemas also opening most of its theaters except for the West Kelowna and Port Alberni locations. Theaters in BC have been closed since November. I feel like our weather is a film in itself, really. All the ups and the downs and...
At least it wasn't Twister, so we're pretty much had everything else, though. Very, very exciting day in terms of weather. We had very heavy downpours overnight and on and off throughout the day, but in between those downpours, we had some hail. We had spots of just brilliant blue sky and sunshine, and it would change within minutes. So you kind of give you a bit of whiplash keeping track of it. Still seeing some unsettled conditions tonight. And in fact, we still have severe storm warning for the sort of southeast corner of the province and a bit into the central interior as well. So certainly could still see some thunder and lightning. For tomorrow, though, this is what we want to focus on. Everything's calming down. We're going to head into sunshine and very warm temperatures from here on out, and that'll be well into next week. And that's pretty much across the province. We're looking great up in Dease Lake. The very northwest part of the province will still be in rainy conditions for tomorrow, unfortunately. But then taking a look at the 5-day forecast for us here on the south coast, it is gorgeous and getting increasingly warm. So tomorrow's high will start off with some morning cloud and even the slightest chance of an early morning shower before it dries out and brightens out. Even warmer for Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. That is the first official day of summer, and that will be our warmest one. We'll be up to about 27, 28 degrees inland, about 25 near the water. So pretty good day to kick off the season.
Can't complain. That looks great. Thanks, Amy.
You're welcome.
You can always find our news program online, cbc.ca/BC. Dan Burrett is here at 11 o'clock after the National with your next local news. Have a good night.